Yo, what's up? It's Jimmy on from Glitchy Thumbs. In today's episode, we have character 3.4. We created it in Procreate, brought it over to Blender to create the 3D model. The character is Dino Turtle or Dino Head. That's the name I came out with. Check out the last video for the Blender video. If you haven't already, you'll learn a little bit about my process and how I had to visualize how to create it in the 3D space. We only had a side view of the character in a 2D sketch, and I don't have the front view because I'm just too lazy to draw that part. Check out that video. You'll be able to see the 3D model that we're going to be using in today's episode. Without further ado, let's get to the video. I open up Buildbox, click create new game, 3D game. We have the default screen, the cube, that's character 3.4, Dino Turtle. We drag the FBX into Buildbox. We get this message that says mesh body exceeds the limit of attached joints, and the value is 60. That's the first time I got that message for this type of error for my FBX. That's because we used the Wolf meta rig that was provided inside of Blender. That one has a bunch of joints in the bones. This is what I mean by there's limitations in Buildbox. You can't use over amount of joints within your skeleton. I would have to go back to Blender to fix it. We're going to need to fix that. Once that happens in Buildbox, the FBX doesn't import. So how do we fix it? We go back to Blender. I went into pose mode. Let's double check this error again by dropping in the FBX just to make sure everything is correct and that the error shows again. Yes, the mesh body exceeds the limit of attached joints. And this is the value of 60. I'm assuming there's only the max amount of 60 joints that you can use in Buildbox. So how do we fix this? Inside of Blender, I duplicated character 3.4 collection. That way we have a backup of the character already. I love my backups. In case I mess up, I can just delete that collection and restart again. That makes much more sense to have two different collections going on. So this one's going to be less joints. This is the one we're going to be using to fix it for Buildbox. The one that we saved as a backup, I'm going to uncheck that so it's not visible in Blender. That one's the one that has many joints. Most likely, maybe we might need that in the future. Who knows? Definitely have backups of your character. I'm hiding the rig and I'm looking at the meta rig, which is the bones and the skeleton. We need to go into edit mode. I checked the checkbox for names so we can see what each bone is and possibly what we can remove to get under that limit within Buildbox. There's a lot of bones in the spine. We don't really need that many bones. That's the first thing I thought of. I was trying to see if I can possibly just remove some of these bones. I selected spine 8 and 9, right-clicked and selected dissolve, selected bones, and that actually dissolved spine 8. So we were only able to dissolve one of the bones, but that's perfectly fine. I selected spine bones 9, 7, 6, and 5. Did the same thing, right-clicked, dissolve selected bones. That removes spine 5, spine 6, spine 7. We're left with spine 4 and spine 9, and they're still connected, which is what I wanted throughout this process. Wanted to make sure I'm minimizing the amount of things I need to do. Right here, I just need to align the bones. I don't know the difference if I keep this huge bone in the spine the way it is, whether that would affect the 3D model or not. Like, I haven't really tested it much to actually know. Normally, I just have the bones in a similar size across the entire 3D model. Down to the pelvis bone. We usually don't need the pelvis bones for our character because we already have the thigh bones. Just keeping that area for our character. Again, it's important to realize what bones you're supposed to be removing. These bones actually hold your character in place for the animation purposes. Otherwise, when your character gets deformed, when you move your rig layers, it stretches your 3D model. Sometimes it won't look good. That's what the bones are for. At least that's what I'm noticing as I'm using my characters in Buildbox. You'll be able to see that with some of the characters that I've worked on where I removed certain bones that should have been kept, like chest bones, because it keeps the chest in place so that Blender knows not to deform the character too much around that area. That's just how I see it in those characters that I worked on. I'm being pretty cautious on the bones that I'm deleting. I'm removing these breastbones as well. because we already have the front thighs. I'm removing the shoulder bones. This is helping us to eliminate some of the joints. At least that's how I think of it. Each bone has its own joint. I'm assuming each bone has 2 joints. I don't know. I need to look that up, actually. There's a front endpoint. There's an end endpoint. I'm assuming that would be 2 joints. I might be wrong, but I'm going to look at it probably after this video. I just reverse engineer and delete bones one by one. Ones that I don't need, and then I retest to see how it goes when I re-import it into Buildbox. Go to the front view. The skeleton is misaligned. It's off to the side. It should actually be in the middle. It's always good to keep everything aligned. I don't know why that was off to the side. I thought I arranged it already. Maybe not. And those were the bones I decided to delete. Since we have our rig already generated, we can go back into object mode and go back to the sidebar and scroll down and click regenerate rig. But then I noticed the feet area. This is where a bunch of joints could possibly be giving us errors in Buildbox. We really don't need this many joints for the feet. This was a preset that I used in Blender for the wolf meta rig. You can use that in the armature when you add the single bones or the armatures or the human bones. I use bones and skeleton interchangeably, so you guys probably know that. Just whatever makes sense to me at the time, I'm just gonna say it. Since we already deleted specific bones, normally I would just export it again and test that set that I deleted to see if that worked. If it didn't, I would go back into Blender and start deleting more bones and more joints. But this was the first time I had this error, so I was trying to see if I'll just do it in one go. I don't know if there's an option in Blender that just tells you right off the bat how many joints there are. I had to manually count it later on towards the end. That's the way to do it, to make sure you're under that limit. For the feet, you can tell that I didn't align this based on how the original skeleton was. My feet is entirely different. It's just much more of a different shape than the bone. But this is how I use Blender. I just put the bones wherever I think it is. Even if it's incorrect, it still works. The functionality works, and that's what's important to me. As long as I'm able to animate my character, then whatever happens behind the scenes doesn't really matter much. If I'm able to get my idea across with my animation, that's what's most important. Before deleting more joints and more bones, you need to make sure that all the bones that you deleted is actually going to work. That's why I just decided to go back into object mode and regenerate the rig. This time, the rig didn't generate at all. There was an error, and it tells you at the bottom, the error is spine 004, input to rig type must be chain of 3 or more bones. We deleted some bones in the spine. It looks like we should have kept one of the bones more in the spine because it says has to be a chain of 3 or more bones. So we already made a mistake not checking to see if that was correct. That's why I like to do things one by one and then just click generate to see if it would even generate. That's how you know. Unless you have experience using Rigify, then you just have that knowledge based on intuition. But I didn't at the time. This is the first time we're doing this, so I'm actually trying to figure it out in the video. Since I have no idea how to revert back and figure out if we can just add a bone or not. We could have just added a bone, I think. But during that time, it's just easier to delete this collection and then just start over. Now we know what we're not supposed to do. So I need to just duplicate that collection again for character 3.4 and then just start over again, rename it to less joints, hide the rig, keep the skeleton, and then check names so we can see the names in front. Since I wanted to remove the bones and joints in the feet, let's just start with that to see if we can resolve that without touching the spine and the other bones like the pelvis. For the feet, we don't really need all these joints. It's just there taking up room. But which joints can we delete is the important thing. I decided to delete the joints on the outside, keeping the one in the middle because we still need something for the front or the feet. I did the same for the opposite side. I'm doing the same for the back feet. Once we're done with that, we need to test this. Back into object mode and click regenerate rig. If it successfully generates, that means we didn't really need those bones. So that's good. We can still have our generated rig with how the way it is, we still see the rig layer for the feet that's going to be used in the animation. So that's perfectly fine. We didn't even touch the spine or the pelvis or the breastbones. If you want to test this out, you can go back into pose mode and just move things around to see if it's correct. I actually pressed play to see if anything would play, and nothing was playing at the time. So I thought maybe the animation wasn't being applied. I hid this less joints version and unhid the original character 3.4. I clicked play and the animation plays for this one. That's a little bit odd. It should still be playing for this rig. I went into my animation tab, selected everything, went into all the actions in my action editor, just selected the idle animation, pressed play, and nothing seems to be playing. That's a little bit odd. That's another problem I guess I needed to fix. But since we need to test this in Buildbox first, I'm going to export this by going to File, Export FBX, select the character 3_4 name, and then just add a different extension so we know that this is a different file. I put tests for joints, and then check selected objects, armature, mesh, Z forward, uncheck add leaf bones, uncheck NLA strips. This process I've always been repeating because that's just how it was during this time. I didn't really create a preset for the export options. I was doing it over and over like I have in all my characters because I want to build that knowledge and that muscle memory by doing it over and over until it makes sense. That's why you see me repeating things over and over, because you have to practice over and over for it to get into your memory bank. That's how I do things. I force my brain to remember. I definitely know the process now. And then I learned the shortcut by creating the preset where we can just select whether we're doing an animated character or a non-animated character. And then it would automatically already select the options for me before I export. That's why, if you're curious why I'm always repeating the same things, that's just how I learn. We click export. Now for this test for joints, FBX, drop it into Buildbox, see what happens. Click import. If we were successfully able to import, that means we fixed that joint issue. We didn't exceed the amount that was available for Buildbox. I think it was 60 that I mentioned. So we were able to be under that. We would need to go back to our bones to see how many bones we're actually using, and then make sure that this time, this is the amount of bones we're always going to be using for Buildbox, because that's the limited amount that we're able to use. Now that we have character 3.4 Dino Turtle into Buildbox, this looks pretty cool. I really like how it turned out. We already resolved that first error where we had the joint issue. That's finished. We have that solution now, but we need to go into Blender to make sure that our animations are still being applied to this newly generated rig, because that would be a problem, having to recreate animations again. But I don't think I needed to do that. I just need to select the right things in order to see the animation. I went into pose mode in Blender, selected the idle animation. Now we can see the animation for character 3.4 Dino Turtle. You can see it didn't really affect our animations, removing all those joints in the feet. I'm going to test the walk animation. With the walk animation, you can see the feet is deformed in a certain way. Now some of the feet is missing, and that's incorrect. That's not going to be good for using in Buildbox. So that's actually another problem we have to fix now. Sometimes when you create new rigs, like we did with character 3.4, I duplicated the collection. It creates duplicates of animations. This is something I don't like. I like to keep everything organized and not have duplicates within certain areas, unless I created a duplicate. In the action editor, I didn't add those duplicates of those actions, so that bothers me a lot. The way to delete it is to go to this top panel over here, select that tab that has a picture on it. I should actually know these names, but I don't. I just go with whatever the symbols are. Go to Blender file. In here, you can just delete things within your Blender file that you don't need. That's how I keep everything organized and tidy. Under actions, we can delete some of these duplicate actions because we really don't need the duplicates. I already have a walk animation and I already have an idle animation. We don't need duplicates of it. You can just delete it with no issues. Just go back to the view layer and you're back to your original settings with all the different characters and their collections. Now back into the action editor, you can see those duplicate animations were deleted and it keeps everything organized. We just select between the idle animation and the walk animation and get back to fix this issue. Now that we know that removing the joints on the feet messes up our 3D model. This is being stretched in a different way, I guess. Or the vertex groups were probably applied to certain vertices on our 3D model. That's why we have this messed up area where the feet is. That's not what we want. That's not good, actually. I decided to test it again for the FBX just to see how it looks like in Buildbox. File, export, FBX. Since we already selected all the options on the right, it's going to already be saved for us. We don't need to do it again. This time I called this one Animated Fixed Joints. Click export, drag in the new FBX to see how this looks. I want to see the feet and whether that affects the character in Buildbox. This one we have to select create new, so it actually creates a new character instead of modifying the one we already have. Just delete that other FBX to make sure you're using the right file. Go to the scene, click edit, change the outline from white to black to make sure that process is correct, and it is. I don't run into the outline issue anymore, because we resolved that in the previous characters. I forget exactly which one it is. I just remember there's character 1.4. No Stash Guy is one of the problems where we had the outline. There was a few other characters actually, but now I forgot because I've been recording so many videos and making so many characters that it's a little hard to keep track of. But I do have the videos available. I just need to rewatch it to actually grab more notes that I actually talked about. I haven't done that just yet, but one thing at a time. I'm just focused on recording, narrating, getting the content out first, and then I'll go back and review everything that I talked about and make mental notes or even just notes in general about what the video was about. That way I have reference points for each character on what I talked about, any new ideas I came up with, whatever came to mind in that video, what important processes I learned, what important things I need to refer back to. That's going to be done at a later time. Let's click into the character. You can see we have two animations. One is for the idle animation and one is for the walk animation. That's perfect. I checked looped for the first one. I'm trying to see what it would look like in Buildbox because the feet was all messed up in Blender. Let's see if it actually is messed up in Buildbox. And it is. You can see we're missing feet now in our 3D model. Looks like his feet got chopped off or something. That can actually be part of the game as a 3D model that we change it to for the character. He lost his feet, some sort of game, or something happened in his journey walking around the 3D world, or some sort of whatever game mechanic that I came up with. That's actually pretty interesting to have some missing feet maybe as a uniqueness of character 3.4. Dino Turtle. He could just be a very ancient turtle that went through some things in his game journey, whatever story we come up with, and he just lost his feet. That's a possibility to revisit that. But what we need to actually do is fix it because we want the feet back for Dino Turtle. I need to test the walk animation too, just to make sure that the walk animation works. The walk animation works perfectly. This one is a little bit weird now because we have the missing feet. Things are being stretched in the wrong areas. The outline is being portrayed based on that. Also, I'm studying all the areas that I moved. We have this weird part for the shell as it's sticking out. It's part of the animation. A little bit odd, but I like little things like this because it's very apparent that that's happening and people are going to actually say something about it. But that's more of a reason to keep it. That actually grabs your attention and you're obviously gonna say something about it. I want that for my character. I want to grab as much attention as possible for my games. There's various little things that I want to keep, even if it's like something that people think I should not. But that's the importance of making your characters unique and memorable, is having little things that's not perfect about your character and just keeping some of the imperfections that make it one of one and super unique. This is a prototype character, so of course not everything's going to be perfect, and that's how it should be. I can always go back and fix it. That's always an option. But for now, we are just prototyping and it's fine to keep it the way it is. But definitely the feet is something I want to fix. We also have all these texture files that we made for the different types of shells. We have the plain shell, which is what I drag in to see how that looks like. This plain shell is just a solid color, but this one actually has the outline in the little crevices. So we can actually see that the turtle shell isn't just plain. It somewhat has a square pattern on it already because of the outline. You have that shell movement for the area near the tail. It probably has that effect on the shell because we animated the tail towards the end. It's interesting that some of this stuff doesn't show in Blender when we animated it. In Blender, it looks perfectly fine, but when you bring it over to Buildbox, for some reason, it looks different than how we originally had it. So that's how I test things to make sure if the animations even come out right. You have to just test between Blender and Buildbox to see if both are correct. If it's not, there's something maybe you have to fix in Blender, or you have to learn a little bit more about the process and how Buildbox uses your animations. Not everything's going to come out perfectly. Back into Blender, we know removing the joints on the feet caused this problem. So what can we do to fix that actually? Again, what we can do is just delete this collection. Make sure to delete the hierarchy. Otherwise, you have to delete some of the extra folders that are left over in Blender for your character. We're going to start over again. This is how I normally do things. I just start from my backup. It's just much faster because we already know the first time around when we tried to fix the less joints version, we removed things from the spine and that caused an issue. Now, the second version of the less joints, we removed things in the feet for the different joints and that caused an issue. So we know now not to do that and try to figure out a different solution, maybe removing less joints in the spine this time instead of deleting 4 at once, and maybe just deleting some of the joints for the feet instead of all those joints. That's how my brain thinks is, okay, we've already tried these various solutions and it didn't really get us to the end result that we wanted. Now we can just try another solution based on that to see if we can actually resolve this as quick as possible, but also making sure our 3D model looks exactly like how we created it in Blender, and also our animations come out correctly without any deformations like we saw. There's a lot of things that you actually have to think about this process. I'm actually glad I have this on video because it just helps people understand how Buildbox works and also things that I did to resolve it. I did end up resolving it. I just forgot, but that's why it's important to go through my videos and see what I did. Since I'm using that backup again, I should have just fixed the positioning of the joints before duplicating again because it looks like this is being redundant. I'm continuously having to do this and I didn't really notice it at the time, but now that I'm watching this, that's something I should have just fixed first. There's a lot of things that you don't really notice when you're actually hands-on. You're more focused on trying to fix the solution than you are on other tedious things. My focus was trying to remove the joints and I wasn't thinking about anything else. I was just doing the same thing over and over just to see if we can get to that solution. But there's other little things I should have fixed first. Back into this less joints version, starting from scratch. What did I do to resolve this actually? For the feet, I moved this forward a little bit closer towards the actual feet. I mean, I've kept this in the same place. But this is also important that you reset your character's rest position before moving any joints. When we're animating the character or showing the animations, it deforms your character and then it stays in that position. But anything else you do, it just looks like it's all messed up, but then it's not. For our walk cycle, I had the feet out first, so that's why it looks like any rest position, the feet is always going to be out. To fix this, you have to be in pose mode and then go to pose, clear, transform. That should have fixed it actually, but it didn't. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does. I don't know why though. Anyways, going to edit mode. I just deleted 4 bones on the right foot and I'm going to be doing the same for the left side. And then doing the same again for the back side. We're only deleting 4 across each foot, seeing what happens if we did that. Originally, I just deleted all those bones, and that probably caused the issue. Go back to object mode and click regenerate rig. This is going to be successful because we didn't really delete that many joints. We just need to hide the skeleton and keep the rig. We don't need to parent it again because it's already being parented. We just needed to regenerate the rig based on the joints we deleted. Let's test this again. Go to export, FBX, rename this to whatever. I added a 2, so we know this one's different. And I do this for the purpose of the videos. It makes much more sense if I organized it in the video so that when I'm explaining it, it makes sense as I'm going through it. But if I have to go back, I know that, okay, this FBX was for these deleted joints that we did. And then the other FBXs were for specific areas that we deleted, like the spine or such and such. Now that I know which file is which, that's the reference points that I've been talking about in my videos. Let's delete this character, drop in the new FBX. This one is number 2 of the fixed joints. Drop this into Buildbox, and now we get that error again that the body exceeds the limit of attached joints. So we didn't delete enough joints this time. Deleting 4 on each paw or each foot doesn't resolve the problem. We still have more than 60 joints, as that's the error. Back into Blender. Click the skeleton, go into edit mode, and then delete another 4 joints in the feet, another 4 on the left side, another 4 on the back feet, and then regenerate the rig in object mode, and then see what happens this time. This time we have an error. The feet has to have a chain of 2 or more bones. I'm guessing a lot of these bones need to have 2 or more bones for it to be able to be generated, and just double checking by clicking regenerate again to see if we get that error. Sometimes I think it's gonna work even after it says it's not gonna work, but that's just to double check to make sure there's no errors within Blender. I'm just trying to get through as quick as possible. Since we need 2 or more bones, I decided to undo all the joints that we deleted. Now I decided let's just delete the ones closest to that middle large bone on the feet and see if we can just keep it this way, whether that keeps our foot still not messed up. Let's delete all of that for all the feet. It should still hold the structure since we have the outer bones correctly. Some of these bones are going to be misplaced, and that's perfectly fine. You can arrange them if you want, but I just kept it the way it is. I'm trying to do this as quick as possible. Try not to create more problems for yourself as you're going through the process. That's the part of a perfectionist. If you see another problem, you want to fix it, but you already have a problem and you need to resolve that first. That's where my mind goes to first. Resolve the problem that will get you closest to your end goal, and then just focus on that. And then if you want to go back to polishing or fixing those other tedious problems you had, then that's a time to go back later on in the project. That's what I think about most of the time, because I will just fix every little problem as I'm going, but is it necessary? Not really. We just need to get the joints fixed, making sure the feet aren't messed up right now. Back into object mode, regenerate the rig, and this one works successfully. Go into pose mode, make sure we know the animations work now because we've tested it. We're gonna have the keyframe animations in Buildbox anyways. Go to File, Export, FBX. This one I just kept the same name to overwrite the number 2 of the fixed joints. Perfectly fine. Our number 2 earlier didn't even work anyways, so it doesn't really matter about that file. Let's test this FBX by dropping into Buildbox. We got something going. Click import. If it works by showing the import button, that means we've resolved the joint issue. That's how I have confirmation normally with Buildbox. I could just count the joints to make sure we're under the same amount. I should actually look into whether there's an option to see how many joints, bones we have. That just makes it much more easier. Similar to how it shows at the bottom how many faces and vertices that we have, I feel like there is an option to see how many bones we actually have, which would be very important to see at this very moment in time. Click the character, and we actually have 3 keyframe animations this time. Probably a duplicate because we have a duplicate of character 3.4 as a fixed joint. We probably created another animation like we were showing earlier on by checking Blender again in Action Editor, bring down all your actions. You can see we have another walk animation that was created, and that's going to happen. We're going to need to delete that later on by going to that picture button or that picture tab, click Blender file, scroll to the top under actions, delete that walk animation that it created a duplicate of. I like to keep it organized. Yeah, I don't know why. It just bothers me. Like if I didn't create it, then it shouldn't be there. That's how I think. Because I know all the things that I worked on within my characters. If there's something odd that stands out to me, I'm just like, that's not supposed to be here. That's why I think it bothers me when certain things happen when I'm creating my characters or creating my game mechanics. If something doesn't go right, I'm focused on it like, wait, why did that happen? That's why I enjoy, I guess, fixing things. I like to figure things out for myself and see, okay, something happened throughout the entire process. I definitely did something for it to happen. So we can always find a solution to fix it. How we find that solution really depends on what steps I take to get to that end result. You're seeing me go through my process of how to fix it, because I really don't know how to fix it. This is the first time we stumbled on this issue. The way I'm fixing it would be based on previous knowledge, and I had no previous knowledge of this. So I have to go through it step by step to see what would fix it. But we're always going to end up with various little other problems that come up. And it's just important to show this in the videos. I think people are going to go through this process as well. It's easier to see someone who actually fixed it, and then you can avoid that yourself, possibly make your life so much easier by just seeing how someone fixed it first, and then you can just take your shortcuts from there. I like to do things the hard way. Either way, I'm gonna fix it my way and then have that content, and I hope this is helping everyone out. Please like this video though. I appreciate it. I've been forgetting to say like this video a lot. It's just not on my thought process anymore. I'm just trying to get through the videos now, as much input of all the things that I'm doing, just so that it's very informative and less about vanity metrics and stuff. But all that stuff really helps the video, so I appreciate your help. Back into the view layer. I don't know why I'm exporting this again. We already exported it, but I guess I'm exporting it again because character 3.4 is just supposed to have 2 animations. So having 3 bothers me, but I could have just deleted it in Buildbox for the keyframe animation. But I guess I wanted to keep the FBX organized as well. In case this is the final FBX that we use, I might as well just do it now. Drop this into Buildbox. And I do this so that we can test. Remember, it's always good to test your FBXs first. In Buildbox, FBX is successful. This one has 2 animations because we just deleted that 3rd one. Check looped for both. Go into edit, change the outline from white to black. I just like seeing the outline on my character as we're testing. Just brings it out much more from the background. It's like a focus thing for your character, having it outlined, and it just looks pretty cool. With this animation, we can see the idle animation rocking back and forth. We're still having an issue with some of the missing feet for Dino Turtle. You see, I could have just kept it this way and kept going and just build my prototype and go back, but this was bothering me. We definitely need to address this now. Like in Blender, it's perfectly fine. It looks like we have our feet intact, but in Buildbox, that wasn't the case. That's the weird thing. Like, I didn't know at the time that little things that you would do with the different joints would affect how your 3D model would look like in Buildbox, but I guess it does. I'm guessing that's why a lot of people don't use their own 3D models, because that's going to be an issue having to figure it out, and that slows you in your workflow process. But this is going to be something I needed to figure out because I'm going to be using my own characters. If I'm able to resolve that problem, then I won't have that issue for all my future characters. That's why I wanted to fix it. It's important to me. It's important to my workflow process. So I need to figure that out. What I did this time was select everything, cleared the parent so that the rig is not parented to the character. See if that is going to be affecting anything. As you can see, when we unparent it, the mesh isn't messed up near the feet. But when I press undo and then reparent it again, and you can tell if it's reparented because the body and the outlines within the meta rig, which is what I called it. It's supposed to be a rig, but I renamed it incorrectly. Having it parented actually messed up the 3D model itself. Clearing the parent actually fixes it. The 3D model is fine. So there's something wrong with the rig. To me, at the time, I think I thought of the vertex groups. Whenever you parent your rig to your character, it creates vertex groups. That's how Blender tells, okay, this part of the body is being moved by a specific part within the bones by their vertex groups. It could be that we're using the old vertex groups as we're animating the character. Maybe I had to delete all those vertex groups at the time first, and that was what I thought of to resolve this problem. There's so many vertex groups that this was going to take some time actually holding that minus button or clicking the minus button as many times as possible, one by one. I thought there had to be a faster solution, so I clicked this arrow button to bring down the menu, and there's a button that says delete all groups. That's way faster than one by one. That's how you would do it. We need to do it also for the outline. The outline has the outline group, so we just delete everything and then add it again. Now let's test it by just selecting the body and the rig and then parent it with automatic weights to see what happens so that it actually creates new vertex groups. And we parented the body without the outlines. That's why the outline looks a little bit out of place. I just hid the outline. We don't need that right now. We just need to know whether this fixes the feet with the new vertex groups. I selected the walk animation. It looks like the feet is fine, so that possibly could have been the solution. I deleted the old outline. Normally when I delete the old outlines, it's because I'm thinking that if we just reparent it, it might not come out correctly. It was always good to just start fresh like I normally do. That's why I duplicated the body again and then go through the outline process. It just makes much more sense because we know the body works with the rig this way. If we duplicated it and just recreated the outline again, going through the process, this time it should actually work. We're going to try this version of the character. This is the one where we deleted all the vertex groups and reparented everything so that it creates new vertex groups. File, export, FBX. Just overwrite the one that we've been using, the fixed joint number 2. We don't need to keep creating different variations for something that's already close to being resolved. We only need the variations when they're all important to keep. And they're not all important. So we have another duplicate again. Go to the button at the top, Blender file, action, delete that duplicate walk animation. That seems to be a common issue right now. Go to file, export, FBX again, overwrite. All right, we have this FBX that we're going to be testing in Buildbox. Start new if you want to keep everything organized, because if you keep dragging in the same FBX into Buildbox, sometimes you can't delete it in your file. That's why I like to start fresh in any program that I use. I just want to keep everything organized from the beginning. I know what these files are, and if there's any other things in the project that I'm not using, I don't want that in the project actually. That's just how I work. That's just what's been working for me. I'm dragging this into Buildbox, and we get the attached joints message again. That area I thought we fixed already, so that's a little bit interesting. Did I click the wrong file? It should be number 2. I'm surprised that didn't work. That's interesting because it worked earlier, but now it doesn't. So what caused that to not work again? We deleted those closer joints to the feet earlier on, and we did that for all the feet, and it worked. This time it doesn't. That's a little bit weird that we still have this joint issue. Since we need to delete some bones, let's delete these breastbones. We don't really need that. We already have the front thigh bones, and we already have the shoulder bones. Instead of getting ahead of ourselves, let's just delete those breastbones, go into object mode, regenerate the rig. Let's just test that. Export to FBX again, overwrite that fixed joint number 2, export back into Buildbox, this in, and we're still exceeding the limits for the attached joints. I think during this time, I didn't count the bones. That probably would have been a way smarter thing. Like I said, I wish there were values. Oh, there is values actually. I just noticed that now at the bottom of the screen. But in pose mode, it says bones 135 out of 374. So there is numbers for the bones, which is interesting. I didn't notice that before, but now that I'm watching the video, basically what I was looking for is actually at the bottom. And I didn't notice that, I guess, because we weren't in pose mode. But now that we are in pose mode, it actually shows the bones. I hid the rig and then brought back the skeleton. I'm usually recording my videos and possibly it's being cut off at the bottom. I didn't really notice it. But I guess there is values at the bottom. That's good to know, actually. I really didn't know that was there. But it says we have 57 bones total. So that should have worked. I'm surprised it's not working because we're under the limit, which says it was 60, but we have 57. Oh, actually, that's for the bones. For the joints, it says we have 85. So we're actually exceeded over the amount of the joints by 60. So we need to delete 25 joints. So I think it's 2 joints per bone. We need to delete like 12 bones, something like that. I think it's 12 bones. So what bones did I decide to delete? It looks like I could just delete the feet bones again, similar to what we did in the beginning. The problem might have been the vertex groups. So if we did that and just started with new vertex groups, that probably would have solved the issue. Maybe I didn't get to that point. But that's what I'm thinking about right now. That's pretty interesting. I started with the pelvis bones, deleted that. That brings our joints down to 84. So every bone has 2 joints. So we need to delete 10 more actually. You can see I actually didn't notice that at the time. That's why I'm doing the bones and joints slowly. That's just how I decided to do it at the time. I didn't really pay attention to what the errors were saying. I'm just going one by one and reverse engineering each time I delete the bone, and then exporting the FBX and then just dropping that into Buildbox to see if we were able to resolve this issue. We're still exceeding the limit because it says 60 only. We have 80 or 81, something like that. I selected everything and cleared the parent and removed all these vertex groups. I probably thought at the time that the joints were within the vertex groups and that might have been causing us issues. Maybe the file itself just had all the joints, even though we weren't using some of those joints. Like the breastbone, it might have had its own vertex group or something. I don't know. That's what it seems like I was thinking at the time. That's what I wanted to test when we reparent it without the vertex groups. So it's like fresh and it creates new vertex groups. Let's export and see how that goes. Drop that into Buildbox. That doesn't work either. You can see I'm just trying every little thing to make sure that if I did have to go through this again, I'll at least know, okay, I did this, I did that, I did this, and I pretty much did everything, and that didn't really resolve it. Now that I have this video, I know not to do any of these things the next time I run into this issue. We can just go straight into the actual solution for the problem and then just get through our workflow process. At the time was taking up a lot of time, I guess, trying to figure out exactly what was going on. But I could have just figured that out by looking at the values at the bottom. Like I said, you don't really notice these things when you're working unless you're paying attention. When you're in that mode and you're in that flow, you're just trying to fix it right away. And you don't want to mess up that flow. You just go with whatever comes to mind. Much like how I'm recording this video, I'm in a very good flow right now. Like I feel like I'm just naturally talking about the entire video, the entire process. I'm just going with it. Whatever I'm talking about is being recorded. We're going to be able to have a very good video of the things that I'm talking about. This is all very new to me on how I fixed everything, because this is the first time I stumbled upon this issue with the joint issues. It's good because we're going to need it for the future characters and any other characters that we work on. I think it's important. I don't think there's a lot of information about this using Blender and Buildbox and your own characters. So it's good that I have these videos, be able to put it out, being educational for people to figure out if they want to use this for their own projects. They'll need to know some of these pitfalls that you're going to run into. I ran into a lot. That's important to put this video out. Hopefully this is helping you guys out. Trying my best to narrate as much videos as I can. A lot of the videos have very good nuggets. I ran into a whole bunch of pitfalls, and I think it's important to share all that because a lot of people will get frustrated, just possibly quit. These are various things that you might not be able to find a solution for. But I'm a little bit of an overachiever, so I like to figure that out and try to get to the end as quick as possible, but also it's very important that I figure it out. If I'm going to continue this game dev journey, I'm trying to do things myself, create my own characters, build it into a game mechanic. This is going to be very important in my journey. That's why I'm focusing on the narration to make sure I get through this entire process. This time I deleted 2 more bones for each of the feet. That helps us delete, what was that? 8 bones. There's 2 joints per bone. So that's deleting 16 joints at the moment. I could have just looked at the bottom. We have 73 joints. So we're still over that limit actually. Again, I forgot that we have to have 2 or more bones if you have the feet like that. I forgot that at the time. Regenerating it like that was pretty much like the older error we had. I just undid that and we still have 81 joints. Even if I regenerated this rig, it works, but we still have to delete 21 joints somehow. I don't know how I actually solved this because I remember I did solve it though. This is interesting. The generated rig this time, we have to rotate it. I don't think we had to rotate it earlier on. I think we just generated it without any issues. Aha. Wait, that makes sense. The reason why I have to rotate it again is because I deleted the rig. Every time we generate a new rig, it's going to generate similar to how it did before. That's why it's rotated the opposite direction, because that's just how it was as a newly generated rig. If we parent it and then generate the rig every time to regenerate it, then we don't have to worry about rotating it. I always wanted to know why that was the case. I remember that in the video before, but I didn't know at the time what was causing it. But now I know after watching this video. That makes perfect sense. Interesting. I'm just fascinated with my own process because I could see how to fix it now much faster. But at the time when you're in that work mode and it's the first time you stumbled upon something, you just like, I really don't know what to do. Let's just try everything. All right, I'm parenting this again. This is not going to work, obviously, because we still have, I think, 81 joints. That's pretty obvious. Looking at the bottom to see how many joints we have. You're only able to see it when you're in edit mode, I think. In object mode, it doesn't really show the joints or the bones. In edit mode, that's where you see the joints and the bones that you have. That's pretty useful. I'm going to keep looking at that in the future. Now that I know that's where to look, like I said, whenever I stumble upon it, that's when it catches my radar. I catch things way more often when I'm observing and analyzing and just focused on that versus actually doing the work. There's like a different mindset that goes on when you're watching your process and narrating. You see it in a different light than you normally would have seen it. Some of the spine bones we don't really need. That's why I dissolved one of them. We're gonna need to delete some more bones. I mean joints. I'm really going one by one, as you can see, which is pretty funny. I'm like laughing at myself for doing it one by one. I felt like at the time I was getting close. The next time I delete one of the bones is the final bone and joints we need to delete. That's why I was doing one by one. That's pretty funny. Of course, still the same error. We're at 79 joints or something. Doing it one by one isn't the solution. I should have just looked at the bottom. That's a mistake I made. It's gonna happen. I'm just gonna be doing things and I don't really know. I could have just looked it up, but you don't think about these things. You really don't. You just think about the problem you had and how you try to resolve it. This is still not gonna work. I think we're at 75 joints. Oh, actually it worked. Interesting. Wait, let me go back. I thought, let's see. We deleted that spine bone, generated the rig, exported the FBX, dropped it into Buildbox, got the mesh issue. What did I delete after that? Back in the bones, I deleted both shoulder bones, but at the bottom it says we have 75 joints and 51 bones. So that should not have worked in Buildbox. I regenerated this rig, and this is the one that I'm going to be testing. I exported this FBX. Dropped this one into Buildbox. For some reason, this one actually imports correctly. That's an interesting thing, that the limit says we exceeded the amount of 60, but in Blender, we have 75 joints. That doesn't make sense to me. But like I said, that's why I was doing it one by one. I had that gut feeling like I was very close. I just needed to delete one or two more bones and it would work. That's just how I felt at the time. This was when it worked. Sometimes that happens. I don't really know why that even works if the amount is exceeded over 60. Weird. I need to count the bones and the joints actually from this point on. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe Buildbox is wrong and we could have 75 joints. I actually need to test that now. I should test that in a new Buildbox project. Use a character with 75 joints to see if we still exceed the amount in Buildbox when we drag it in. I really didn't know at what point where the character would work. I didn't pay attention to how many joints we had, how many we need, and all that stuff during that time in the video. But now I'm paying attention. It's still odd that it worked. But that's good that it worked though. Otherwise, we're going to continue to repeat that process, having to reverse engineer, remove one bone or two bones at a time, and then go through that process of dropping it into Buildbox. You can see it's like a redundant thing, doing things over and over until you get to the answer. That's how you have to do it when you use like no code software like that. You have to do things over and over. It's easier to do things if you were to write code, of course, because the code can actually just run like a loop over and over. But I'm not very good at coding. That's just how I have to do things now. I want to do it myself. I could learn to code actually, but that's going to take some time. I'd rather just focus on the art side, the characters. We'll just need to figure it out the way it's going to be, slow and steady. We resolved that issue. Now we need to make sure that the mesh isn't messed up with our character. Now that we got the character inside of Buildbox without the mesh joints issue, let's test the animation again. Checked looped for the keyframe animations. That way the animations will continue to play. Go to edit. edit in the scene, change the outline from white to black. You can definitely see where my mind goes. It's like repeating things over and over until we actually get to the end result for this character. Now we have character 3.4, Dino Turtle. We finally got the character into Buildbox. I mean, we did before, but it was all messed up with the feet. The feet is now working perfectly. We can see it visually. We still have the design we made. It's working with this nice bouncing back and forth idle animation I came up with in Blender. Definitely check out that video, how I came up with that animation. I thought that animation came out pretty good. It's pretty cool to see your characters being animated, like coming alive. The character looks very different from the sketch. Like I did a little modifications because I felt like it needed 4 legs instead of 2. That's what the sketch was. My sketches are pretty, what's the word? Abstract. That's what I'm looking for. But yeah, look at this. This looks awesome, actually. It's really good for character 3.4. I love it. This is when it gets like exciting, when your characters start actually becoming characters. That's not like abstract or random. It's just exciting. It just gets me there. I'm like excited. Like watching this video again brings my excitement for Dino Turtle. Like I want to go back to fix this character, possibly expand on the idea. We haven't even gotten to the game mechanic yet, which is still going to be in this video, which is funny. I'm just adjusting the character so that we can compare both of the animations. I duplicate the character. We already have the keyframe animation in both of them. I just need to connect to the other play for the other animation. I need to drop this into the scene so that we can see the 2 animations side by side. This is the first time I was actually thinking about having animations side by side. I've only had the idle animation, except when I use Mixamo, of course. I think I had multiple animations for Mixamo, but for my own animations where I have to do it from scratch, I wanted to have some sort of preview or some sort of screen recording that showcases both animations or all the animations, so you can see like an idle animation and also the walk animation that I worked on. I actually really like this. I like that the shell moves like that. It's like a unique thing for my character as he's walking. Like his shell is a part of the body, but at times when it walks, it looks dislocated or something. I think that's like the uniqueness of creating your own characters. You can do like random things and it just makes your character much more unique in that way. It stands out to me that that happens. There's actually going to be probably something that people mention about the character, like, hey, that's not supposed to happen, but this is art. Art should be whatever it is. However it was created is however it's going to be shown. That's what I'm going with. It's a one-of-one character, super unique, hasn't been created other than me drawing and creating the character in 3D model and then bringing it into reality and bringing the character to life. That's going to be part of the character, Dino Turtle with the dislocated shell. And that's going to be part of his story. So yeah, the walk cycle is just sliding. I definitely see that. And I actually lift the feet later on in some of my future characters that I'll be narrating soon. I do notice some things in my earlier animations. I didn't want to do too much up front. Just go with the flow, see what animations you come up with, and then just export it. You'll notice that, okay, next time maybe I should do this. That's when you start adding on to your animation. I can always go back and fix them. For the scene, I just decided to select the same background color as the grass floor to keep the focus on the character. Since he's gray, everything else is green. That keeps the contrast different from each other, from the background, the floor, and the character. That keeps our focus on the animation. At least that's where my eyes are going. Even though it's gray, we can always add color later, as I've mentioned, but it still works. This is going to be the scene that I record. This is the design that I came up with for the shell, just having, you know, like a specific pattern for the squares. It's like a gray pattern and a black pattern. I also have the texture that we used for the plain shell. That's what we can do here. We can drop it in to Buildbox in the texture space. So we can replace, click restart. This one is the plain texture shell. It's just one solid color. We still see the pattern because we did the bevel and the extrusions to create those crevices in the shell, and applied on top of that is the outline. The outline is actually creating the pattern for the shell. So that's why I did the bevel and the extrusions, because I thought that would actually work with the outline, and it does. It looks pretty cool, keeping it as a plain shell as well. All that is subjective. Some people might like the other design, some people might like this one. I actually like the original design that I did because it's a very different, it's less plain, It's more unique. It was something that I thought of at the time. We could always have different color shells for this character. We always have different designs. I can always draw something on top of the shell. That can also be a skin option for a future game if I wanted to. That's a possibility. Skins for the shell is something I could think of. That would be pretty cool to provide that for different players. We'll see what I decide to do. Possibly I might come back and expand on this idea. I think it would be pretty cool to use this character. Possibly maybe remodel it. Who knows? What did I do? Let's see. I'm actually going into Photoshop, which is interesting. I don't remember doing this, but I opened the plain shell texture in Photoshop and also opened the pattern shell texture. You can see the differences between the two. The plain shell texture has just a solid color. It doesn't even have the coloring on the bottom of the character with the shading and the white on the chest. For the pattern shell, which is what we did a lot of the shading on, also my pattern that I did on the shell, that's applied right there. Things we can do in Photoshop is just make the textures better. Or we could just change the color, or we can just remove things. Whatever you think would be best for your character. I don't know what I was doing here. I don't remember going into this deep for the shells. I'm removing the black squares, keeping the gray squares. I guess maybe I wanted to see how that would look like. These are some things you can do for your textures. I definitely like working better in Procreate or Photoshop for fixing the textures. Just feel like the tools are much more better for this use case. Using it inside of Blender is a little bit weird to me. But then when I do this, we can't actually see it being applied live on our character. I actually have to figure that out so that I can actually see whatever we're doing live. I haven't done that just yet. I know there's a solution. I don't want to say I've seen it, but I've stumbled upon some videos. It felt like I could just have it set up a certain way where when I click save, it will just automatically show all my character, and then I won't have to worry about dragging things back and forth. The way we have to test it is exporting this PNG file, rename this to gray pattern, and then just dropping in the new texture on top of our old texture, and then we could just see the gray pattern without the black squares. We'll still be able to see the black pattern because of the bevel and the outline. This actually looks not too bad. I like it. We didn't do shade smooth on this character. You can still see the low poly design on my character based on my quads. It actually looks pretty cool though. Keeping it that way. I saved the project, clicking previous character's name, which is character 3_2_new. This one's character 3.4. So we need to increment that value, save it, and then export to iOS. And under project settings, I always use the same bundle ID. I keep it the same because it's so much easier to just export under one bundle ID and just test all my characters. I'm not uploading to the App Store or anything. It's not really my focus at the moment. And export to iOS, continue export, save this new project. This is our Xcode project. Open it in Xcode, click General, signing in capabilities, select my team, increment the bundle ID here in Xcode. I put 3.4. Under bundle display name, just put character 3.4. I run this to my device. Once we run it to the device, we have character 3.4 with the idle animation. He's rocking back and forth. Also, we have side by side the walk animation. I'm grabbing this screen recording right here that you're seeing. This is what I'm doing on my iPhone. I like to have it in a video form so I can always go back and review the video if I need to probably generate more ideas with this character. We have to go through an entire process just to get this one video for me to review and have in my photo album on my phone. Anytime I need to think of any ideas, or if I want to look at the character again, maybe get a different perspective in another day. That's the importance of having this video and all these animations. That's where I was at in this video and where my mind was at. I was making sure that I have my animations so I know, okay, we have this auto animation, we have this walk animation. What can we do with the character now that we have these animations? It's in a clean scene, so we don't really have a game mechanic just yet, but we have this video and I'm able to look at it over and over and see and think like, okay, what can we really do with character 3.4? Dino Turtle, we have all these characteristics of it already. We have the pattern shell, like where can we use this character? That's what I was thinking of. And I think this video is probably getting a little bit too long. Let's make this part 1. That concludes this video of character 3.4. Dino Turtle, building it into Buildbox. Super fun to work with, creating the animations. We had to figure out how to fix the mesh issue with the joints. You can definitely see it was like a mixture of Blender and Buildbox that I had to go back and forth, but we fixed the issue. We were able to get it to 75 joints and it still worked in Buildbox. Hey, like I said, if it works, it works. We don't need to try to figure out why it worked. It just works. It allows us to move forward in our game dev process. Don't look back. You know what I mean? I'm just kidding. I'm just going to make this part 1 because this is actually a pretty long video. So we're going to save the actual game mechanic that I decided to use this character in for the next video. For a part 2 of the Buildbox video. I've been trying to separate things where it makes sense, not trying to make it like a very long video. I feel like that would be a little bit weird for me, but I also want to keep things separate in terms of having reference points. Now that I know that part 1 of this Buildbox video is about the joints, fixing them, deleting bones, making sure the mesh is correct, and then also bringing in the animations. Now that I know that, and it's in this video, definitely like this video. Please subscribe if you haven't. Let me know what you think of the entire process. Is it helping you? Is it not? What else do you want to see? Do you want me to explain more things? Am I doing a good job explaining things? I would like to hear that in the comments. That'd be cool. But yeah, definitely check out the part 2 of this video if you want to see the mechanic that I used. We're making characters, we're making games the glitchy way, the only way, my way. See you next video. Peace out. Don't miss it.